Before we begin, this episode contains discussion of mental health and suicide. If you're struggling, please reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling or texting 988. What do we do with the parts of life we never asked to carry? The losses that rearrange you, the ones that leave a before and an after, and a version of yourself you're still getting to know on the other side. Today's conversation is about how to choose hope and healing in the midst of grief, and how meaning gets built not after the loss, but with it. Welcome to the Building Thinkers podcast. Today's episode is a tender one, and I want to name that up front so you can choose when and how you listen. We'll discuss themes of mental health and suicide prevention. My guest has been a leader in the mortgage industry for over 28 years and currently manages a top producing mortgage company in Salt Lake City. She's also the founder of the Taylor Hagan Memorial Foundation, which brings awareness to suicide prevention and mental health. She shares that her journey has taught her that true leadership is as much about heart as it is about results. And I can't wait to explore that idea further with her. I'm honored to be joined today by
Cristie North.
Cristie. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, first of all, it's such an honor and thank you for having me. I've listened to a few of your episodes and you're doing beautiful work out there. So thank you for what
Thank you
you're
so much.
contributing.
Will you tell our listeners a bit of your backstory that brought you to the work you're doing now?
You bet. So, because we're talking about grief and hope and healing, I'll start with losing Taylor. I'm a mother of 6 kids, a wife of about 27 years. And in 2017, we lost our son, Taylor, to suicide. And obviously, through the first, few months of navigating the heaviness of grief, I also wanted to find a way to not only honor Taylor, but also to help other families never know what this loss is, and to hopefully help people that are struggling to find their way here to stay. And so I started the Taylor Hagan Memorial Foundation literally that week. And not knowing what it was going to look like, I didn't really put a lot of thought into how it would evolve into what the goals were. But through that first year, we created awareness events and created programs for our youth, because also as I look at Taylor's life and I look back at where things maybe have started, I would say it was in his teens. And so if we can start with our youth and help give them the tools and the resources, then I felt like we could make a difference. And so that foundation has evolved. We're 9, 10 years in, and it has evolved much bigger than I had ever hoped and dreamed. And I am just honored that we're, creating something that can help support families and people that are in that space.
Cristie, thank you so much for sharing with us. When you're thinking about families and folks who might be looking for the prevention side of the work, is there something that you would say to our listeners about that you'd like to share on prevention?
So, I mean, I would start with probably something that we are seeing and hearing a lot. First of all, when we lost Taylor to suicide, suicide and mental health meant something completely different to me. It was so foreign. It wasn't really in my circle or my world. It was not something we were having a conversation about like we are today. It has become way more involved in people's lives today than it was, I would say, 10 years ago. And basically, looking at that, if I'm coming from a place of a parent, I would say that we probably could show up differently with not just our children, but our people, our circle. Prevention can be being able to hold space for someone and allowing them to share what they're going through, but also maybe even hearing your vulnerabilities, because people tend to hold back when they think you're going to be judged. But if we're sharing our stories, that gives someone else the space to be able to say, hey, I feel that, I'm seeing that, or I'm experiencing that. And so most often what's happening is that someone is struggling with something that they're afraid to share. And then they carry that so deep inside that it starts to really build and become bigger than what they think they can manage. And so prevention really is about reaching out, being willing to share, but then for the people on the other side, being willing to listen. And I think if we start with that basic support, we can really have an impact on someone's life.
I hear in that a shared holding of prevention as how we show up as humans in all our interactions, in the space we hold for others, and the way that we choose to even be vulnerable ourselves. And one of the things that stood out to me as I was reading through your website and your LinkedIn and your story is you said that you learned that leadership is as much about the heart as it is about results. And I hear in this idea of this shared space giving a connection to that. So can you unpack for us what you mean by leadership being about as much about heart as it is about results?
Yeah. So, I mean, leadership is about results. I mean, our businesses demand it, right? But it's about heart because our people demand that. If you ignore either one, you lose. So if you lean into both, that's where you build something that actually lasts. I would say leadership can really fall apart if you treat it more about just the results. Results matter. You don't get to ignore performance or accountability or outcomes, but results are the output. And heart is what actually drives them. So when you lead with heart, you learn to see people, not just production. You understand what motivates them, what they're carrying. And that's a big one, is we tend as leaders to just think about how we're running the business and managing the people. And we tend to forget that these are people that are carrying things that we have no idea, really seeing and learning what they're capable of, even when they don't fully see it yet. So for me, what I've learned is that's what really builds the trust in your teams. And trust is what gets people to go further, to stay longer. People don't stay for the numbers or the production or the business. They stay for the people that they're connected to. They follow leaders. And so the best leaders sit right in the middle of both. They hold the line on the standards and the results, but they lead with empathy, they lead with compassion, and they lead with connection.
That's so powerful, Christy. It makes me think, I just got back yesterday from the Executive Flourishing Forum, and it was run by an amazing woman, Eleanor Allen. Shout out to Eleanor Allen, for putting this together. And she brought in Matt Lee, and he is a researcher at Harvard, part of the Harvard Flourishing program. And he talks about love in a business context. And he said that love is to will the good of the other. Love
Yes.
is to will the good of the other. And I've been sitting with that a bit and unpacking it and thinking it about in my business context and my projects and working with colleagues and collaborators. It is giving me a lens to pause and to think about what does it look like, and to use your language, to show up with heart or to show up with love, which sounds for some maybe listening like counterintuitive or like, oh, save that for outside the workplace. What the research is showing that makes so much sense is that when we do show up in that way, you don't have to use the word love, you don't have to use the word heart, whatever you want to use, but this caring and this warmth in combination with high expectations. So being that warm demander, like the both and,
Yeah.
it's those leaders that are producing long-term results because their people stay, their people are connected, their people have that trust and psychological safety that we need for innovation, that we need for a dynamically changing world. And so I'm curious how that kind of sits with you, this idea of love is to will the good of the other, and have you seen that to be true?
If I look back at my leading style pre Taylor's loss, I was a different leader. Losing Taylor changed me. And I came with a different way of looking at people. And there are a lot of leaders that I highly respect that I've had the opportunity to work alongside that haven't had a big loss and lead with everything you are talking. That's just their innate way of who they are. Now, for me, I would say it was a big shift, and I started to look at people differently because of what I had experienced. So, and the lens really shifted for me, and my leadership style took a different path. I still care about the results. I think that's, you have to as a leader, but you start to understand something deeper when you realize that your people are carrying so many outside of this environment that we, spend our 8 to 10 hour days in, and when you can show up for them in that way and all those things, I echo what you described. I think you are so much more successful and you make such a bigger impact on serving them versus just leading with a tile.
Mm. Ooh, I've gotta sit in that for a second. Serving them versus just leading with a title. Yeah. I think that well, I have 2 potential different directions. Maybe we can go down both in our conversation, but one is, okay, so let's say we have folks who are listening who are in that leadership role, and they know that somebody that they're working with is carrying a heavy loss, something that they didn't, ask to come into their life, and they're navigating that grief. What would you say to leaders who want to serve their people well and have all the reality of day-to-day business and things? What would you say to them to help them respond in a way of care that is aligned to supporting what people may need? And I know that might be different for every person, but what might you say?
I think it's important that when we start to pay attention, you can see how people are showing up. And if you are really in tune with your teams, it gives you the opportunity to notice those things and maybe even identify something's not aligning. And then that gives you the opportunity to bring them in. And the first thing is not what's happening here at the office, what's happening at home, what's happening in your personal. Give them the comfort to know that they can share outside of what that relationship is with the leadership employee dynamic. But if you can do that and start with that first, you are going, it's going to have such a powerful meaning to them to know that you care enough to sit with them on that personal level. And I know that, that can be challenging because leaders sometimes take that position of, I've got to keep this space. I need to keep it professional. I want to, have some boundaries. But I think leadership has changed. I don't think it's this hard draw a line in the sand anymore between you and your people. I think it's we get more if we have that connection and if they know that you truly care about them. So you're taking the time to walk around the office if you're not working remote. You're getting to know your people. You know who their families are. You know what they're doing that weekend. And that allows you to really be able to take the opportunity when you notice a shift to tap into that because you've already created that connection.
Yeah, it's, making me think about modeling the groundedness, or I just came from flourishing conference, so I'm like, the flourishing, like, as a leader, modeling the centeredness maybe is another word that's coming to me, that you have time and space for the humanness of work, and it strikes me that that is becoming not less important, but more important in light of technology, in light of speed and efficiency and scale and everything we can hear in kind of the noise of progress, to recognize it's a false choice, perhaps, that it's not progress or connection.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
that yeah, there's something around that that, it bugs me sometimes that some of this, again, gets classified as, like, fluffy and extra and like, "Oh, I'm just not that kinda leader, I'm just get things done." But for that leader, I hope they hear that this is part of getting things done, so it does produce better output for you if that's where you need to start on this journey. Like, it does produce better results to care about your people, but it's also better for you as the leader in that connection, I think. So if it if you need to hold that for a moment and to step into this space of care, I think part of it is pausing that, like, intense sense of urgency to trust and sit with for a moment that caring for people can still really produce those results. But what if it was fun, even dare I say, along the way? What if it was enjoyable to be at work? So many of the things that I see that actually stifle innovation and productivity are when they're people problems. And those people problems can be reduced by knowing and caring, to your point, about the people that you lead and building a culture where you're known and supported. What do you think about that?
I'm going to add to that because I think there's also another old style of leadership where you have to come across as if you have it all together and you are running everything perfectly. And there is nothing that is going to get in the way of how you show up. And I think that we can also be vulnerable. And if our team sees us in those vulnerable places where maybe we have to say, something along, I'm probably not showing up at my best today because this happened and that I'm navigating with one of my kids at home, or that creates another connection and a realness to us where they can see that we also are coming in
Yeah.
along with our own things that we're carrying and still have to navigate carrying both of those things. There
Mm.
was this, I wish I could think of the title right now and it's going to come to me and I'll share it with you, but we were asked to read it for one of our managers summit. And I want to say it was a Navy SEALs, and the entire book was about really hard leadership, like hardcore. You don't cry, you don't show vulnerability, you demand excellence at all times. And I really struggled with it because I thought that I know that time. I remember when there was a place for that, but I feel like we have made a shift in our culture that we can no longer lead that way. Our people need more from us.
Oh, I
And I
love
will
that.
give you the name of that book so you can
Yeah,
reference.
at first I was thinking, is it turn the ship around because there's a leadership book, about that, and it's more about empowering your people.
I think I have it in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, The Wisdom of the Bullfrog.
The Wisdom of the Bullfrog. Oh,
Yes, and Admiral William McRaven. Now, it's got a lot of great messages in it. I'm not saying that it's not a good book, but there were just some areas that were a little bit more hard-lined than I think where we are today. And so
yeah.
I think there's a place
So
for that.
when's your book coming out?
It should be out in 2027. I should have it finished by then. We'll see what happens with publishing and so forth. My editors are currently working on some of the first chapters, but it will be more of a memoir and it will highlight and share different things that kind of helped align with who I am, who I was as a little girl and who I am today, and how I
Oh,
was able to, survive the loss of Taylor. And not just survive it, living in a space today where I would not have been able to share the first 2 years. I didn't think there was ever going to be a place in my life that I could say, I am living my best life. And today I can say that. And that didn't happen without being intentional.
Christy, I'm wondering if building from that, this idea of I'm thinking a lot about our listeners and thinking about why somebody might have clicked this and the place that they might be in may be very different than where you are now. And I'm wondering if we can go down the road of this question, like, what do we do with the parts of life that we were never asked to carry? I know it's not a simple formula. I know it's not a roadmap, but what would you say to the person that is in grief and trying to put one foot in front of the other?
I love this question.
Yeah.
It's such a good question. It's a real question because all of us at some point were handed parts of life we never asked for. And our first instincts are usually to resist them, push them away, try to fix them, outrun them, or pretend that, they're not a part of our journey. But what I've learned is those parts don't go anywhere. So I think the question becomes, do we spend our life fighting what happened? Or do we learn how to carry it in a way that doesn't break us? And it could be, a divorce. It could be losing a job, the loss of a friend or a parent, or the unimaginable loss of a child. But I would say no one gets through life without carrying something. And so in my experience, it's not been about getting rid of those parts. It's about integrating them and letting them become a part of you, but not the part that defines you. When we stop resisting and we start accepting, really accepting, and that's a tough word for me because
Yeah.
losing Taylor, it wasn't that I accepted it, but I acknowledged it. And when we do that, we create a space where something could shift. I remember those first weeks. I have 5 other kids, and my youngest was 15, and my oldest daughters were in their late 20s. And I remember thinking, I have to figure out how to be the mother to them that Taylor got. They have a lot of life left, and they deserve to have that mom. And so I had to make a choice. And whether your choice is about other children or whether it's about your husband, your spouse, your friends, your family, there's a lot of life left. And we came here to experience all of it, the grief, the challenges, the joy. And I think that's where, real depth comes from. So I don't think we're meant to carry them alone. I don't think we're meant to ignore them either. So when you can do that, you don't just survive what you were given. You become someone who can sit with others at their hardest moments. And I feel like that's something this world needs more of.
Cristie, I hearing that, like, the growth of empathy, that, like, sitting with others and holding space for them as something that emerged for you. I'm curious if you could speak more to the power of community, the power of others, how to help people maybe on both sides of experience of grief, how we talked a little bit about how leaders could maybe support, but also just within friend groups or how to ask for help, how to support each other, anything around that and community.
I'll give you maybe I can touch on an example of our retreats and what
Yes.
really happens when you have a community of people. So I started these bereaved mother retreats, and this is just one area. I mean, there's so many areas that everyone can kind of tap into to create that for themselves. But these retreats last 3 days. They start on a Friday and they wrap up on a Sunday. And I'm telling you this because it's important why the dates matter. These mothers show up to the retreat in their darkest place. They are, in some cases, don't know how they're going to continue. And they have thought through if they want to be here anymore. They are not showing up for their families. Their understanding of self-care is staying in bed. So they're not living. And essentially they also decided not to be here because they're not truly present. And so when they show up on Friday, they have no idea what to expect, but they know other mothers are coming. And the mothers that are showing up are not just mothers that have lost children to suicide. It's all types of loss. By the second day, they have completely transformed. They came in so heavy, hopeless, so much anxiety, and by the second day and the third day, they have literally transformed in front of me. And I don't take credit for that. That is the connection that they're getting with these other mothers, feeling seen, feeling heard, validated in everything that they are going through, because only someone that has lost can truly understand what you are feeling because they are in it. And so finding that community when you are in the depths of grief, and it doesn't have to be a loss, it could be any type of grief. Finding the community of people that can connect with you, that can share and truly understand, that is when you start to really find your way. Now, we can also get stuck in it if we're not surrounding ourselves with that circle of community that also want to be in a place of hope. So we do want to be intentional about, where we're getting that connection,
Yeah.
because I've seen a lot of Facebook groups where people are in these grief groups and they are just heavy, heavy, heavy every day. And you can get stuck in that. So you do want to create a group of people you're helping each other move forward.
What would you say if only people knew?
If we're talking about grief and how much that changes your life, if only people knew that this is what we were always meant to experience. Not many people would probably resonate with this, but it's at one point, I hope you do if you're in this space. I never thought that I would look at the loss of Taylor as collateral beauty. I would do anything to have him with me. I would I would do almost anything. But I don't. And I think about what I have learned through his loss, how much I've grown as a person, how much of a better parent I am today, a better friend, a better leader. If we only knew what that can teach us, we wouldn't resist it as hard as we do when we come into it.
This collateral beauty. And I think that people can come from different life experiences, to your point earlier, of different grief and different things they're carrying that they never asked to, and think about this, even just the words "collateral beauty." I think people can sit in that and look across their lives, and I hear this sense of it doesn't take away the acknowledgement of the loss in the way that toxic positivity could, in the way that trying to push people out of grief can sometimes, people say stupid stuff no matter what, right? But in this, like, I guess what I'm sensing here is this depth and access to this integration that you're talking about, that I think for a variety of experiences that people might have, they can take that term collateral beauty and sit with it and look around at their lives, and choosing to have eyes for the collateral beauty around you is in itself a choice. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, and it isn't something that happens in the middle of it. It happens in through time as you kind of start to really experience your grief in a way that isn't so heavy and it softens. And
Mm.
again, I'm talking on all things like you mentioned, but it doesn't just happen, it's small steps. If I would have said collateral those words would have never come out of my mouth the first year, let alone the second. I can today look at his life and who I am as his mother today differently than I was doing in the beginning. So that took a lot of intentional work. It wasn't me being hopeful. It was me being intentional about hope, choosing hope, but not being hopeful.
Yeah, that distinction of intentionality towards hope, not
Yes.
just being hopeful, but those steps and
And you can, when you realize that you can let grief take everything or learn how to carry it and still live a meaningful life. But again, to get to collateral beauty, you do need to get through heavy.
can we speak to what now life looks like? You've mentioned you now feel like you're living your best life and leading incredible work with the foundation and in the mortgage industry. My understanding is, can you
Yes.
speak to a little bit of that, of how you now think about the relationships that you have around you and anything along those lines? Like, help us see how to live your best life from what you've learned and anything there.
I would say for those of you that are not in your 50s and you're afraid of being in your 50s, it is the decade that I would never have imagined being the best.
This
And
is
I don't
good news. We hear a lot otherwise on the socials and everything.
I think 50s have been my best years, and I will be 56 next month. I think it comes with so many things. Women in their 50s, we show up differently. We have, that confidence that comes in, that lack of putting up with things that you no longer want or don't serve you. You really have the more courage to really, say no than we did probably in our 30s and 40s. At least for me, I look at just what grief taught me. I'm not going to live the next 20 years in survival mode. If I got to do this without him, my rest of my years are going to be what I want, how I
Mm.
want, and it's going to be with joy. And so,
Mm.
like I mentioned earlier, I show up so differently for not only my children, but the people around me. And my best life consists of choosing who my circle of people are, what I want to do with my days, who I want to spend them with. And if I want to say no, I say no. And the people around me love they don't judge me when I say no. They um, support me through the nose.
What might you say to someone who wants to access some of that sooner, some of that learning to try that on? Anything that comes to mind? Asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. I would say, start thinking about what's not serving you today. We tend to lose a lot of energy around doing things that don't serve us. And we say yes to a lot. We can get caught up in the grind of which our egos can sometimes really drive when it comes to our careers and our work. And what I've learned is what's more important than the grind of the day to day are our people and ourselves. And so I spend a lot of time with myself. I love alone time. I love to do solo trips. I'm saying yes to those things today that I didn't do in my 30s and 40s. Now, I have kids. I was also in a big, drive of my career, and I've shifted that. I don't stay at work after 6. I'm not putting in 13, 14-hour days. I'm choosing not to. And so I would say, look at your life. What are you doing today? What can you take off your plate? And where are you going to feel more energized and put your energy there?
I love it, Cristie. Will you share with us where people can find you, kind of winding down our time, where people can find you, any resources you might wanna share? I also wanted to ask you, like, what do you see as the best like, if someone is struggling, I don't wanna end the episode without saying this is where you might recommend they go for help.
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple of options. NAMI is a national mental health resource. American Foundation of Suicide Prevention has a hotline as well. You can get all of the resources off of our website, which is thmemorialfoundation.org. If you are in the midst of grief, there's a podcast Anderson Cooper does, All There Is,
Mm.
which is incredible. So I would say if you were in that place, find that podcast is doing good work. There's some books that I really leaned into companioning the bereaved, even
Mhm.
with someone that is grieving, or if you are not grieving, but you have a loved one that is, Companioning the Bereaved by Dr. Alan Wolfelt. I personally loved it as someone who was grieving, but it also helped me to understand how other people were grieving. And option B by Sheryl Sandberg is a really great book on rebuilding after loss.
On your website, I assume, is, like, the retreats for bereaved mothers and that
Yes.
information? Okay. Cristie, thank you so much for this conversation, for your honesty, for your story, for letting us sit in it and walk through, reflecting on it, and for letting Taylor's life keep reaching people through yours. It's so clear and powerful, and I'm just honored to be sitting with you in this conversation. And so we'll link all of those resources. If this is bringing up anything for you that are listening, we'll make sure those resources are there for you. And if this conversation moves something in you, we'd love for you to share it with someone else who might need it. And then what we'll do on the Building Thinkers newsletter every other week when we put out the podcast, we'll put the blueprint for thought that'll come along with this episode. And so thank you all for listening. And Cristie, thank you so much again for sharing your story.
Thank you, Tracy.